In the soft glow of the early morning, the train station at Cedarwood seemed almost serene, a stark contrast to its usual afternoon bustle. Commuters drifted through, their steps rhythmic against the polished concrete floor, the murmur of hushed conversations blending with the distant echo of arriving and departing trains. At the far end of Platform 3, under the dim light of an overhead bulb that hadn't been changed in months, sat Marian. Marian, dressed in layers that had known better days, her gray hair tucked messily under a worn-out hat, watched the world with observant eyes that missed little. She was a fixture here, as much a part of the station as the old wooden benches or the coffee kiosk, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee was just beginning to permeate the morning air. People often passed her by without a glance, accustomed to her silent presence at the edge of their hurried lives. Today, she cradled a battered book in her hands, lost in the printed words, a soft smile playing on her lips as she read. Occasionally, she'd look up to watch a toddler resisting his mother's hand or a young couple sharing a quick goodbye. These moments, these slices of other people's lives, brought a subtle warmth to her otherwise solitary existence. Nearby, a group of young professionals stood laughing, their voices a jarring blend of arrogance and youth. They were the kind of people who moved in packs, their suits crisp, their briefcases expensive. To them, the station was merely a backdrop to their daily routines, a checkpoint between their high-rise offices and chic urban apartments. Among them was Eliza, a young architect who often felt misplaced among her more boisterous colleagues. Her mornings were a quiet affair, usually spent with a strong cup of coffee and a planner full of sketches and deadlines. Today, however, she found herself caught in the tide of her colleagues' mockery as they pointed subtly at Marian, making quiet jokes about her shabby appearance. Eliza felt a pang of discomfort tug at her conscience as she glanced towards Marian, wondering about the story hidden beneath those wise, weary eyes. Unlike her peers, Eliza harbored a soft spot for the overlooked and undervalued, perhaps because she, too, felt unseen in the sprawling corporate world she inhabited. As the morning wore on, the station slowly filled with light, the shadows retreating into corners and under benches, where forgotten things lay hidden from hurried eyes. It was in these shifting shadows and the quiet observance of life's smaller details that the day's first lessons were quietly sown. As the morning rush crescendoed into a symphony of footsteps and farewells, Marian remained an island of calm, her attention occasionally shifting from the pages of her book to the life unfolding around her. Her gaze lingered on Eliza, noticing the younger woman's discomfort amidst her colleagues' cruel amusement. Marian's mind wandered back through the decades, to a time when she, too, had been part of a world where appearances meant everything and compassion was often overlooked. Marian had once been a celebrated journalist, her articles a staple in the Sunday paper, read by thousands who admired her fearless pursuit of truth and her knack for uncovering stories that mattered. But life, as it often does, had taken unexpected turns. The loss of her husband, followed by a series of bad investments, had stripped her of comfort and security, leaving her to navigate a harsh world that looked very different from the view behind a desk. Eliza, meanwhile, was the daughter of two professors, raised in a home filled with books and discussions about architecture and social justice. She had entered the corporate world with ideals of shaping cities to be more inclusive, only to find that her visions were often drowned out by the louder, more profitable designs of her peers. Her mornings at the station, a brief pause before the storm of her day, offered a moment of reflection, a rare time when she could align her thoughts without interruption. Across from Marian, Eliza's colleagues continued their banter, oblivious to the discomfort they were causing. Their laughter was a barrier, one that marked the boundaries of their tightly knit group, boundaries Eliza had never truly crossed despite her attempts to fit in. Their jokes often skirted the edge of propriety, and today was no exception as they spun a narrative about Marian's presence at the station, painting her as a mere caricature of misfortune. As the group's laughter grew, Eliza's discomfort turned to quiet indignation. Her eyes met Marian's, and in that brief exchange, a silent acknowledgement of each other's presence, Eliza felt a surge of empathy. She excused herself from the group under the pretense of needing another coffee and approached the kiosk near where Marian sat. Ordering her drink, She took the opportunity to break away from the superficial chatter, her mind racing with thoughts of how to bridge the gap between her professional persona and her personal convictions. Meanwhile, Marion watched as Eliza walked over, her approach hesitant yet deliberate. Marion could sense the kindness buried beneath the young woman's polished exterior, a kindness that reminded her of friends long gone, of times when her words on paper had sparked change and rallied support for causes that mattered. Those memories were bittersweet, reminders of a past filled with purpose and of a present that often felt disconnected from the accomplishments of her youth. Eliza stood a few feet away, coffee in hand, her heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and resolve. She turned towards Marion, her voice soft but clear. "May I join you?" she asked, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. Marion looked up, her expression unreadable for a moment, then nodded with a gentle smile that creased the corners of her eyes. As they sat together, the distance between their worlds seemed to narrow. Eliza began to speak, not about the weather or trivialities, but about her own doubts and dreams, about the disillusionment of working in an environment that often valued profit over people. Marion listened, her responses thoughtful, weaving in anecdotes from her own experiences, drawing parallels that resonated with Eliza's deeper aspirations. Their conversation meandered through topics of societal change, the role of architecture in shaping human experiences, and the forgotten stories of the city's marginalized residents. Marion spoke of her days reporting from neighborhoods that had been reshaped by policies and developments, her words painting a vivid picture of the human impacts often left out of the public discourse. As the station's morning flurry subsided into the lulls of midday, the initial awkwardness of their interaction faded, leaving a budding sense of camaraderie. Marion, with her life's tapestry of ups and downs, and Eliza, with her youthful idealism tempered by corporate realities, found common ground in their shared belief in the power of storytelling and advocacy. The subtle conflict in Eliza's heart, the clash between her professional obligations and her personal ethics, began to crystallize. Marion's perspective, shaped by years of witnessing and writing about the city's cyclic struggles, offered Eliza a new lens through which to view her role as an architect. It wasn't just about designing buildings. It was about understanding the lives that would unfold within and around them, about considering the broader social fabric they would either weave into or unravel. As their conversation drew to a close, Eliza felt a renewed sense of purpose, a clarity that she had not felt in months. Marion, for her part, felt a flicker of her former self, energized by the interaction, reminded that her stories, though no longer printed, still had power in the telling. Together, they had uncovered layers of their own characters and the roles they might play in the tapestry of the city's ongoing narrative. The climax of their interaction unfolded subtly, as the late morning brought a surge of travelers bustling through the station, their energies and destinations as varied as the city itself. Among the crowd, a commotion began to stir near the main entrance, a disruption all too common in such public spaces. Yet it drew Marion and Eliza's attention away from their quiet corner. A security guard was speaking sternly to a young man, his tone dismissive, his body language indicating that the conversation was less than pleasant. The young man, looking bewildered and frustrated, was trying to explain himself, his hands gesturing to a bag at his feet, his voice rising in desperation. Marion's eyes narrowed, recognizing the signs of a story untold, of a narrative constructed by appearances rather than understanding. She felt a familiar pull, the journalist within her awakening to the echoes of past injustices she'd chronicled. Without a word, she rose, her movements still sharp despite her age, and made her way towards the unfolding scene. Eliza watched, her initial impulse to stay put overridden by a newfound resolve inspired by their conversation. She followed Marion, her presence lending silent support. As they approached, the details of the situation became clearer. The young man was a student, his identification misplaced, his explanation lost in the prejudgments of his appearance and the inconvenient circumstance of his forgotten wallet. Marion's approach was calm but assertive, her voice firm as she addressed the security guard. "Let's just take a moment to listen," she suggested, her demeanor a blend of authority and empathy. The guard, taken aback by her intervention, paused, his expression shifting from irritation to reluctant attentiveness. The student, relieved to be heard, quickly explained that he was traveling to a university event, his participation crucial not just to his academic standing but to his scholarship status. His bag contained nothing more than books and papers, his attire casual not out of disrespect but due to the early morning rush that had started his day. As Marian facilitated a dialogue between the young man and the security guard, Eliza observed the interactions with growing awareness. The episode was a microcosm of the systemic issues Marian had discussed, the ease with which individuals could be misjudged, the simplicity of escalating minor misunderstandings into significant conflicts. Marian's questions were pointed, guiding the security guard to reconsider his initial assumptions. What harm is there in verifying his story? If he's telling the truth, we've helped a young man on his way. If not, then we take the next steps accordingly. But we start with trust, not suspicion. The guard, influenced by her reasoning, nodded slowly, agreeing to check the student's story with the university. As they waited, Marian turned to Eliza, her eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and hope. "See, it's not always about the big battles," she murmured. "Sometimes, it's these small moments, these little acts of understanding, that begin to change the world." Eliza felt the weight of Marian's words settle within her. The realization dawned that her role as an architect could extend beyond the drafting table, beyond the structural confines of buildings, into the very fabric of community interaction. Her designs could foster environments that encouraged dialogue over division, understanding over unrest. The tension in the air eased as the security guard returned, a hint of embarrassment in his demeanor as he apologized to the student, his information confirmed. The student, his relief palpable, thanked Marian profusely, his gratitude extending to Eliza, who had stood by a stranger in a moment of need. As the crowd dispersed, Eliza and Marian returned to their bench, the station resuming its usual rhythm. The incident had been minor in the grand scheme of the city's pulse, but for Eliza, it was transformative. She had witnessed the power of intervention, the impact of empathy, and the potential for every space she designed to be a place of positive, communal engagement. As they settled back into the quiet of their previous spot, the warmth of the midday sun streaming through the high glass ceiling of the station, Eliza and Marian shared a moment of quiet reflection. The station buzzed around them, a hive of activity and life, yet in their small corner of the world, there was a distinct sense of calm and a newfound understanding. Eliza, her thoughts deep and contemplative, turned to Marian, her expression one of sincere gratitude. "Today has been enlightening," she admitted, the words carrying the weight of her evolving perspectives. "I've been so caught up in the technicalities of my work, in meeting deadlines and appeasing clients, that I've lost sight of what initially drove me to become an architect." Marian nodded, her smile gentle. "It's easy to get lost," she agreed, "but it's never too late to find your way back. Remember, every building, every space we inhabit, it's more than just structure. It's about the lives that unfold within those walls." Eliza absorbed these words, realizing that her career could be more than just creating spaces. It could be about shaping environments that fostered understanding and community. She considered her current projects, the plans laid out on her desk, waiting for her to inject life into their blueprints. The realization dawned on her that she could integrate elements that encouraged interaction over isolation, communal spaces that invited open dialogues, much like the very bench they sat on, which had facilitated their significant exchange. Determined to transform this epiphany into action, Eliza began sketching ideas in her notebook, her hand moving confidently as visions of inclusive, dynamic spaces took shape. She envisioned open courtyards in her buildings, interactive installations that told stories of the neighborhood, and design elements that were accessible and inviting to all. Meanwhile, Marian, inspired by the young architect's resolve and reminded of her own influential days, decided it was time to revisit her abandoned passion for writing. She had stories yet to tell, experiences that could educate and influence, much like the narratives she had shared with Eliza. With renewed purpose, she began to outline a blog, planning to share her insights on social issues, personal encounters, and the overlooked corners of the city that had shaped her. In the following weeks, Eliza took her new designs to her firm, presenting them with an enthusiasm that was both infectious and persuasive. She talked about creating spaces that were not only functional but meaningful, that reflected the diversity and dynamism of the city's populace. Initially met with skepticism, her ideas soon gained traction as she eloquently described the benefits of community-focused architecture, drawing on her encounter with Marian and the student as a compelling case study. Her colleagues, influenced by her passion and the practicality of her proposals, began to see the value in her approach. Slowly, Eliza's concepts started to influence the firm's projects, her designs becoming a catalyst for change within the practice and the wider architectural community. Marian, too, found her voice gaining momentum online, her articles resonating with a diverse audience who found comfort and inspiration in her words. Her blog became a platform for discussion, attracting readers from various walks of life, each drawn to her honest reflections and insightful commentary. Months later, as the seasons changed, Marian and Eliza met again at the train station, their regular meetings having evolved into a cherished ritual. They shared updates on their respective journeys, proud of the steps they had taken toward their ideals. Eliza unveiled her latest project, a community center designed not just for activities, but as a sanctuary for open dialogue and cultural exchange. Marian, her blog now well established, discussed her recent piece on urban spaces and their social impact, inspired by Eliza's projects. Together, they had fostered a small but significant wave of change, influencing their circles and beyond. The station, once just a backdrop to their daily routines, had become a symbol of their shared growth, a place where two paths had crossed, leading them to new avenues of purpose and possibility. Their story, a testament to the power of connection and understanding, continued to unfold with each project and post, each a reflection of their mutual influence and individual transformations. In their quiet corner of the bustling station, Marian and Eliza celebrated the journey ahead, knowing that each small step was a part of a greater stride toward a more inclusive and empathetic world. As the year drew to a close, the Cedarwood train station continued to witness the ebb and flow of daily commuters, each absorbed in their routines and reflections. For Marian and Eliza, the station had become more than a mere transit point. It symbolized the convergence of paths, the beginning of impactful dialogues, and the birthplace of a profound friendship and collaboration. In the quiet lulls between the arrival and departure announcements, Eliza often found herself reflecting on the transformation she had undergone since her first conversation with Marian. She had learned that architecture was not just about buildings but about the communities they serve, the human interactions they foster, and the societal norms they can challenge and change. Her projects now carried a deeper significance, each design imbued with the intent to make spaces that were welcoming to all, that encouraged connections rather than barriers. Marian, with each article she published, rediscovered her voice and influence. She was reminded that her experiences and insights had the power to instigate thought and action. Her writing, enriched by the interactions at the station and her discussions with Eliza, continued to challenge her readers to look beyond the surface, to understand the stories and struggles that shaped the city's heartbeat. As they sat on their usual bench one crisp evening, watching the winter light fade into the station's bustling ambience, Marian turned to Eliza, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think we've managed to make a difference?" she asked, not just seeking reassurance but genuinely curious about Eliza's perspective. Eliza smiled, her eyes scanning the familiar scene around them, a tapestry of lives momentarily intersecting in the hustle of the station. "I think," she paused, choosing her words, "that making a difference doesn't always have to be loud or monumental. Sometimes, it's in the quiet moments, the subtle shifts in how people think and interact. It's in the spaces we create, both physical and metaphorical." Their conversation drifted to the viewers of Marian's blog and the clients who had walked through Eliza's innovative spaces, each touched in ways they were still beginning to comprehend. The true impact of their work was like seeds planted, invisible at first but slowly germinating beneath the surface. As the story closes, the viewer is invited to consider their own spaces, both personal and communal. How do the environments you inhabit influence your interactions? Are there places in your life that encourage unity and understanding, Or do barriers still exist that could be redesigned for better inclusivity? Reflect on how small actions and thoughtful designs can reshape not just physical spaces but also the social dynamics within them. How might you contribute to this ongoing narrative of transformation in your own community? In the end, Marion and Eliza's story is a testament to the power of connection and the profound impact of everyday acts of empathy and intention. It's a call to all of us to look around, to listen, and to engage deeply with the spaces and faces that define our world.